The topic for today is 24/7 carbon-free energy. So there's a growing recognition that there's an importance of increasing availability and abundance of clean energy resources. And from the commercial and industrial customers' perspectives, which we have represented here today in the room, demonstrating this commitment has evolved from purchasing credits, either through bundled PPAs or unbundled schemes, which is great for volumetric annual accounting, to positively shifting to hourly matching and doing so in a 24/7 way, which is the topic of today. Carbon-free energy procurement 24/7. This approach, however, comes with its own set of challenges, but also opportunities. So today, I'm delighted to be having this conversation with industry leaders from EDF, Électricité de France, EPE Consulting, Charles River Associates, and Google. So I will ask each one of the panelists to please introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about your work and what you are passionate about as it relates to 24/7. So please, Ryan.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Ryan Eslicker. I'm based out of Houston, Texas with EDF. First of all, I guess I'll start with EDF. EDF's a large electricity producer across 6 continents. We produce 475 terawatt hours of power, so all spans of power, really focused on renewable power, a lot of nuclear production, a lot of hydro, a lot of solar, wind, hydro. We have some thermal gas as well, but really focused on renewable power. What I do specifically within EDF is really focused on, it's a bit of an infrastructure fund of sorts here out of Houston that we focus on North America, making early stage investments in industrial projects. Most of these are hydrogen-based or hydrogen derivatives, so green ammonia, hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, methanol, so kind of riding that IRA wave of sorts. We were highlighted by closing a large project in Newfoundland in November, up to 3 gigawatts of wind, taking that wind, making hydrogen, and ultimately converting to ammonia for export to Western Europe. So that's really my mandate, but I work for a very large renewable power company that is very much focused on delivering renewable power. 93% of our power that we generated is low carbon. So nice to meet everybody and look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Ryan. Chris.
If you click, it should be. Oh, there we go. There we go. Do you want me to do this part now or later? We can do it later.
Introduce yourself and the company.
Cool. I can do it for the company. Hi, I'm Chris Matos. I work for a California search startup called Google. You might have heard of us. I am a UT alum of the LBJ School and the Jackson School for Geosciences. And like, where the other LBJers at? And with Google, I help work on our 24/7 carbon-free energy procurement strategy. My title is long. It really just means I try and develop the innovative market structures and market design rules that help us either self-procure or work with utility partners to procure 24/7 carbon-free energy. How we think about that, let's see if I hit it correctly. There we go. So how we think about that is really firming up resources. It's a little bit of a journey of how we've been procuring energy for data centers. Oh, it's missing the one slide. Oh, whatever. We started with our first corporate PPAs and just started with renewable energy credit matching. As you can see, that doesn't necessarily perfectly match to the load of a data center, which is 24/7 and fairly flat. There are all these gaps within it. And in 2021, we recognized that there is an hourly component of this that we need to meet in a growing energy demand environment, and began going about the process of firming up all of our power supply across an hourly basis. Let's see what that's led to these days. No? Okay. Well, I have another chart with our global on it that basically shows where we've come with this strategy. There are places where it's easier and there are places where it's harder. And frankly, in more liberalized markets where there's a lot more market access, we have done better because we can work with utility partners. We have the ability to negotiate with the EDFs and other developers of the world to self-supply. And then where there is less openness, usually in Southeast Asia over here. This is where we're working really hard globally to develop new and innovative market designs. So that's what Google's doing in 24/7. Can't wait for the panel. I don't know if you have anything.
Thank you. Google.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Hugo Mena, I'm the Chief Growth Officer for Electric Power Engineers. I am also a UT alum, Macomb School of Business, and so it's nice to even though I live in Austin, it's nice to come on campus. I've been with the company 16 years. We are an engineering consulting firm that focuses on supporting the grid stakeholders, essentially plan and operate their grid. So we have three main business units. One that focuses on supporting utilities, ISOs, public and regulatory offices, where we help them, plan for the next year, but also for the next, 10 to 15 years. On the other side, we support the stakeholders that want to interconnect to those utility companies. And so we help large loads, generators, and independent transmission developers to essentially help identify where to site their projects, help them through the whole interconnection process so that those projects are modeled adequately and therefore integrated into the grid as soon as possible. We also have a software solutions business unit that essentially focuses on providing tools and automation to our clients so that we can be more effective and efficient and essentially create ways so that ISOs like ERCOT, SPP, MISO, PJM can actually get through the queue, not only for generation addition, but also for the large amount of large loads that is being added to many of those jurisdictions. I'm a power systems engineer myself, but I haven't been doing a lot of power modeling, power system modeling in a while. And I'm looking forward to kind of this panel because it's a pretty interesting topic.
Great, thank you. We can pass the, to Margarita.
Thank you. Well, my name is Margarita Patray. I am a PhD energy economist. I work for a consulting company that's called Charles River Associates, and I also sometimes teach energy economics at Northeastern University back in Boston. So consulting company, it's almost like a law firm. We're a collection of professionals. A lot of us are economists, and we're into everything. I work for energy practice, and we work with utilities, we work with developers, and recently with data center developers, and some hyperscalers as well. Technical difficulties. Right. So we work, and I work a lot on procurement and somewhat on resource planning. And this process conducted by utilities is really what defines what kind of generation mix you're going to see in a given area. Because in most of the country, utilities are the ones who are providers of last resorts. They have obligation to serve. And to do that, they have to plan. So all utilities, they have an obligation to serve. They have to plan for the future. As some of the previous speakers mentioned already, it takes a while to build new generation. So you have to start planning sometimes really well in advance. Most of the plans are about 20 years in advance. And what those plans are called are integrated resource plans. They start from a load forecast, and this is where utilities are forecasting who is going to be the user on their system. Some of our large load clients are really interested to make sure that they are represented in this forecast, because if they're not, they're not likely to get energy in a given area. So there is load forecast. then the utility decides what kind of, well, first of all, they look at the resources that they already have in place, and then they decide what kind of generation they want to procure to come and serve the future load. And this is really where the decision on if you're going to have a lot of renewables or not is largely being made. So utilities decide they will need additional load, additional capacity. They decide what kind of capacity they want to procure. And then the procurement starts. And this is the procurement for the future, procurement of capacity between utilities and different generation owners. This is often when we come in as well. So we procure on behalf of utilities. But utilities, again, together with us, set the target of what is being procured. It can be also an iterative process because price matters, right? When you are a ratepayer, you don't want to pay crazy amount for your electricity. So for utilities as well, price matters. So we often conduct a procurement that means we're asking the different capacity owners, how much are you selling the capacity for? And then we put in these prices, we report those prices back to utility, and utility decides based on those prices what they want to procure. I'm making it is a long process, but I believe this is one of the key process in resource planning.
Great, thank you, Margarita. And I think that's a good segue into helping us, the audience, understand what is 24/7 CFE, carbon-free energy procurement. How do you do the process, and which methodology do you use to anticipate and to model 24/7 and the pathways as it relates to your clients when they come to you?
So 24/7, what does it mean? This is the process usually when a load is aligning their usage with renewable energy sources. The question is, how closely is that going to be aligned? And there are three tenets of this process. The first one is deliverability. 24/7, does it mean that if you are the load, the consumer, does it mean that this renewable source is going to be directly providing energy to you? Or can it be, let's say, a wind farm somewhere far away in California, and you are here in Texas? Does this count? Is having a PPA with a resource in every time zone, does it make you 24/7 renewable? So that's a big question to decide. Deliverability. The second one is, I have a cheat sheet here. Temporality. The second one is temporality, and that means when, right? When you are matching your consumption. If you have a big solar farm, can you match your consumption in the nighttime with this solar during the day? Does that count? That's another question to decide on. And the third one, in my mind, the most important, is additionality. Is this whole plan encouraging new renewable generation to come online, or you are coming into the area and just buying up all the renewable resources, leaving nothing to others, right? Or are you encouraging new? So those are the three tenets, the three questions that need to be decided when you define 24/7. And there is no one agreed upon definition currently.
Thank you so much. I want to turn it over to you, Chris. You know, with Google certainly being a big player, a big customer, you may have an idea of what's needed in terms of infrastructure. And so I wanted to ask, from your perspective, what's needed to meet the rising electricity demand? And do you envision all this expected growth to materialize in the near future?
Man, someone could get a Nobel Peace Prize for answering that. There's not any one solution, and Google has really focused on maximizing market flexibility for the build of infrastructure. we're behind in the infrastructure build out today. And that's because in 2017, when you asked utilities, what is your load forecast? They said 1% or negative. So we pivoted very dramatically from a negative load growth environment to a hyperscale load growth environment. And the financial, the regulatory, the planning processes were not designed for doing that. So not only are we having to revisit how we think about planning, how we think about operating the grid, how we think about building resources, we're also now needing to go and revisit those things we had time for in terms of liberalizing markets and creating multiple opportunities for investment into this and move them faster. And in my view, the biggest hurdle has been making change in the regulatory structure that allows for multiple points of investment into the infrastructure grid.
So regulatory, a big component here. Switching gears to the supply side of things, Ryan, if we were to meet this realistic growth, what are your thoughts on the type of technologies that are needed to be playing a big role, and which ones do you think will be having that leadership for the next 5 to 10 years and probably beyond?
Yes, so I certainly think it's an and story, not an or story, much like what Chris is saying. It's everything. And I grew up in the refining world, and it's going to take all forms of energy to power the forecasted growth, certainly. I'll do one quick plug on the other side of my group that we look after the molecules and a lot of the e-fuel side of it. We have a long duration energy storage side of the house that a few developers that not only look after traditional battery storage, which there's lots of growth there, but kind of non-traditional, non-lithium ion battery storage, and that's highlighted by some pump storage hydro projects that we entered into about a year and a half ago now, a developer. So certainly saw the opportunity and the need for higher load storage overnight, especially to battle intermittency. We entered into a joint venture with Ride Development. So we, as EDF, bring our resources and our capability around hydro to these pump storage hydro projects, long development cycles, big CapEx, but again, solving for a specific need that is large load overnight that you have declining CapEx and increasing performance, hopefully in lithium-ion battery. But some of these projects, industrial customers like data centers, need larger loads overnight. So that's what we try to tackle with the pump storage hydro, just as an example. And obviously, you hope for stronger improvement and lower CapEx in batteries on the lithium-ion battery side or other battery breakthroughs to be able to help solve for those overnight intermittent hours when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. So if I were to say anything, it's certainly and not or, though.
Great, thank you. Ugo, based on what you've seen through your expertise at EP, heard storage being a big component from our perspective. Do you agree with that? Do you see other resources also being on the table to enable 24/7 CFE? And are there any emerging technologies that you are particularly excited about?
Yeah, so certainly storage it's going to be a big player. To kind of Ryan's point, it's an all-in kind of strategy, and long duration storage will be a big player, right? But not only that, right? The lithium-ion technology and the current technology that we have, if the cost keeps dropping, if technology improves and the runabout efficiency continues improving, then it comes down to, as you think about a decentralized, distributed set of storage systems across our grid, will provide significant flexibility to be able for us to deploy those resources and be able to take advantage of as much carbon-free energy as possible. But you have to also include that demand flexibility, not only from large loads, but also from your residential customers, right? And so if we think about the adoption of electric vehicles or electrification of heating in the Pacific Northwest or in the eastern side of the U.S., well, at that point we're adding additional load to the system, and essentially that's going to create additional transmission lines or upgrades to the distribution system to be able to compensate for that. And so if you add demand flexibility and you put in place the right technology and tools that consumers can decide whether they want to be let's say 100% renewable profile. And so now with technologies and machine learning and AI, essentially you can be able to dispatch your load, let's say, right? And whether it's the way you charge your vehicle, the way you heat or cool your home, the way you utilize your washer and dryer or your pool pump, right? To essentially be more in line to the profile that you want to be, right? And so that's essentially, it's providing flexibility for us to be able to procure more carbon-free energy. And so again, technologies like that, it's really going to be a game changer. And at the level of commercial and industrial, that impact is still will be beneficial, right? Because large cooling devices, the processes, and how let's say those commercial and industrial facilities can adapt the way they operate so that you can match the load closer to the carbon-free. Plus adding, energy storage, potentially localized or a little bit distributed, can augment, the penetration of carbon-free energy.
Very exciting opportunities ahead. I want to switch gears a little bit from the technical to the financial and the partnerships required for this. Margarita, in your work, are there any models that you deem as best case or that you would have identified as either time-proof or policy-proof? Perhaps it's early on in the process, but how do you see these partnerships as successful right now, but also adapting and evolving into the future?
Okay, so the transactions that we see the most is between, as I mentioned, between utility and developer. And there are two types of transactions. You can, just with anything, you can lease or you can buy. You can buy the asset or you can have a power purchasing agreement. You can buy the whole package of services that they provide, energy or capacity, or you can buy a subset of that. When it comes to large loads, we usually don't see a big desire to, but Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't see a big desire to own and operate the generating assets because, it's a hassle, it's a pain, it's a special skill. We see the large loads usually wanting to connect through utility. So it all goes back to utility and what kind of structure they want to do. In my opinion, just with anything, a hybrid approach is the best. You want to have a portfolio. You want to have some ownership and you want to have some leases as well.
Right. Well, talking about utilities, Ryan, do you work with other companies to de-risk technologies? What is your approach to that? Are you seeking for a specific TRL? How do you diversify your portfolios? Tell us more about that.
Absolutely. It's particularly my mandate is we go out and bring development capital to early stage projects where there is an existing partner in there developing a project that has a good idea, the right project, kind of the right geography, and the right technology is certainly a pillar within that. If I think about our most recent transaction on a Power to X project in Atlantic Canada, we entered into the Exploit Valley's Renewable Energy Corporation project, which is a big Power to X project. So taking this natural resources of good wind, fresh water, proximity to end markets to Western Europe, and some investment tax credits in Canada to be able to essentially harness the power of the wind and extend the value chain into the green ammonia space. Their TRLs we look for there are above 8. It's not so much a TRL issue here with some of the electrolyzers we use, it's the scale up. You're talking about multiple gigawatts of electrolyzers when 5 megawatt installation or 10 megawatt installation is a big deal at the moment. So we certainly seek out strong partners where we have are bringing a lot of expertise to the project around the wind development, some solar for balancing, some batteries. We're looking for strong partners that have industrial expertise that are going to solve these hard problems because a lot of these projects at scale, to be world scale and to be able to compete, it's the big scale up that hasn't been done before. So again, absolutely looking for strong partners. We generally target TRL 8 or above. But the biggest thing here is you have to be malleable throughout your approach. So partnering, picking a vendor right out of the gate, it's hard right now on some of these, particularly around electrolyzers. A lot of folks say they can do it, but the proof's in the pudding. So you're going to have to be malleable. You're going to have a good EPC partner. It's all about partnering and selecting the right partners. We within EDF have nearly $1 billion a year we spend on R&D across 170,000 employees. So we do a lot of that internally, but at the same time, we know we need help and we need to go out and seek the right experts to be able to develop these projects and stand down a project when there is a fatal flaw and put forth a project when everything does pencil.
Great, thank you. Oh, yeah, please, Chris.
So the other component here is, depending on the jurisdictions that we're in, which are vertically integrated, is shielding the cost to ratepayers who are a capture audience. These technologies for CFE are not cheap compared to the least cost of service resource that they are mandated with procuring. And so, we've become partners with utilities in implementing things through new tariff structures. And a tariff, for those who don't know, is basically how a utility charges you all of your energy. And we have said, okay, but for this resource, what's your price? And they'll give us a price. And the difference between that least cost price and what the CFE resource is, we'll pay the basis difference. So that you keep the consumer at the end of the day cost neutral on this, and we still get the CFE premium, and it's optimized within your portfolio dispatch. Because as Marita said, we don't really want to be in the business of owning these assets, but we do want the capacity that they represent for our data centers. And this can be a structure that works beyond just data centers in terms of how it can be applied. Because we're, lo and behold, not the only large load that is growing in the United States. And as is going on in Texas, it's actually being driven by oil and gas. So what we're trying to do is create structures that incentivize many different types of consumers to be partners in many different types of technologies.
Great, thank you. Talk about malleability, structures for tariffs. Hugo, how do you go about navigating, with your customers and your clients, different regulations, interacting with different PUCs, their constraints, grid constraints, whether it's ERCOT, MISO, CAISO, anywhere else in the world? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, certainly, the different system operators in different markets are, bring different regulation environments. In some cases, even within one system operator, you go from one state to the other, and the regulatory environment changes. You have markets like ERCOT, which is the majority of Texas, where you have a lot of flexibility, and you can interconnect the generator and drive load growth very fast. But then you have other markets like in the Southwest Power Pool, where it may take you 7 to 8 years to build generation facilities. And so to the point of the procurement side, right? It comes down to the partnerships that the large loads have with the generation developers. And I think, those partnerships bring added value to both parties. In terms of the regulatory environment and what we do is, we work towards identifying, what is the path of least resistance for our clients. Is it co-locating and partnership, both a generator and a load, into a particular interconnection, something of value? And so we're able to work through the different regulatory milestones and the necessary technical studies that need to be done so that these kind of resources can come into play. And so it varies by geographic location, and it's a matter of making sure that we keep projects driving forward, and we try to interconnect as much as we can.
Awesome. So moving on to the implementation side of things, we found the right partners. Regulation is perfect, or at least, in what we need. Chris, your data center is up and running, and you start checking things. Are you on track to fulfill this 24/7 commitment that you have? But you start noticing some discrepancies. So first question for you is, how do you verify your matching process? What are the barriers for 24/7 CFE verification? What are the solutions? And the second question, if I may, what are those discrepancies between the operational side of things, the planning, and how might they limit the deployment of technology?
Yeah, you would think tracking how everything is generated in all of the RTOs would be a pretty straightforward process, but data amongst individual utilities is the messiest thing in the world. Not everyone has the same metering configurations. They are not all automated. There are utilities out there who are still reading residential meters, even from the magnets that dial around. Texas, we don't understand this because we have smart meters due to competition here. All of our meters are digital, or at least most of them are. And so we've gone through the process in other RTOs, especially where there are the REX registries, of getting to an hourly component of that to start being able to match our hourly profile. And we're actually working in partnership with the Texas Energy Buyers Alliance here on an MPRR in ERCOT to start getting to an hourly matching. And it's not easy. There's incomplete data that comes into the RTOs all the time. But the idea is to create an energy attributes credit that can also recognize the different technologies and what they're doing. It's stickier around storage right now because of the redeployment factor that needs to go into the carbon-free energy. But there are solutions around it, and we're working through it with partners as we speak. So broader buy-in is the big thing about it, but just also the determined push and making sure we're capturing the right data flows, and we can manage that. The operational and planning worlds, I think everyone on this platform can shake their head at this one in some way, form, or fashion. And Hugo, correct me if I get this wrong here. When transmission planners model the system, they model everything at 100%, which is not based in reality. This is even sticky for load or for storage, because storage is typically modeled as a draw on the system during the peak. So what does that mean? It means we're overbuilding the system. We're building for this worst case scenario that doesn't exist, in part because we would never operate the resources in the way that the models have to plan. But we model for the worst contingency for a reason, and that's because it's conservative. There needs to be a conversation between the planning and the operating world here about how to build in some flexibility for that, particularly in the case of storage, where it may not be drawing on the system during the system peak. It will actually be contributing energy during the system peak, and therefore reducing potentially the need for transmission infrastructure or other things here. It also tends to not necessarily deploy storage resources particularly well. It blocks them into 4-hour tranches on sort of an 8760 cycle, when you kind of have a lot of flexibility within that. So I'm being told we have a little bit of time, so I'll stop there. How do we get y'all comfortable with it would be my question, Hugo.
So you bring a good point, and it comes down to a little bit of a cultural and kind of change management, right? Yeah. And the reality is, like, if we go back 20 years, we didn't have the computing power that we have today to be able to run hourly, 8760 analysis, right?
I have a data center for you.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so studying the grid as a snapshot in time is what we're, let's say, used to doing, right? Studying the grid and all the nodes on an 8760 still requires good computing power. We have the computing power to do that, but in some cases, it just takes too long to run that and make a decision. But if we think about long-term planning, utilizing more of an hour-by-hour approach could be a way for us to identify where we want to go. I also, throw in the fact that in many markets, we're not using dynamic line rating when we do planning, and so that's another way for us to, let's say, optimize the assets that are currently installed, so that we can bring the most generation and the most load and do the best matching that we can.
Gotcha. So it's like self-fulfilling prophecy. You need more computing power to calculate large loads, and so you're increasing the large loads to do that.
I think the computer science people say sometimes you can just go at it with a wrecking ball, which is just compute power. And I'm fascinated by that concept.
My work. But taking a frame of mind, Hugo, of snapshot and looking to the future, as we move forward, what do you think are some of the existing gaps or some of the gaps that we'll see and that we need to fill in terms of expertise and skills, whether if it's AI, policy, financing, and which sector you think that will need to be addressing that the most urgently?
I do believe that in the world that we are today and that we're moving into, we have to do a better job of educating our regulators and the staffs that support the regulators so that they have, I'm not saying that we're going to make them power systems engineers, but that they have a better understanding of how planning and operations work. I also think that we're going to have, and we have it today, we have a challenge of, the engineering talent that we need to be able to drive the study. And so to that point, the development of tools and automation and the implementation of machine learnings and driving, from our point of view, power systems engineers to maybe at some point also be computer scientists, right? So that they can combine the two and essentially, approach and take our resources and be the most effective that we can be.
Great, thank you. Perhaps to conclude with an optimistic view here, Ryan, can you tell us about a project, 24/7 related, of course, that needed some critical pivoting or adjusting to succeed, assuming it succeeded, hopefully? And what was the key takeaway from it that you draw on, if also that drew any changes in your approach to the conversation of 24/7?
Yes, so again, I'll take it less from a production as more of a consumption end with some of our e-fuels projects. You need to work through a lot of pre-design optimization to understand how many batteries do I need. There's CapEx assumptions with that. There's performance assumptions with that. In understanding how much molecular storage I need to optimize, it's not just chasing a high utilization, like a run rate like you would have in a traditional refinery where everybody's chasing 100%. Here, you need to find out what's the optimal utilization rate that makes sense from a kind of a unit value economic standpoint. It doesn't make sense to go deploy 3 gigawatts of batteries to try to achieve 100% utilization on a green ammonia facility and your ammonia synthesis loop. So it's chasing really doing that pre-design and working with an EPC, and again, then being malleable. If it's behind the meter, like our project is up in Newfoundland, it's a little bit easier. Really, here in Texas is the big opportunity is this great grid in ERCOT with a lot of production and a lot of projects in the queue. It's pretty easy to get to 50 or 60% utilization on a SAF facility through your Fischer-Tropsch or distillation units. It's really hard to go chase those incremental electrons to drive up 60% to 70% to 80%. And that's really where you need a good commercial capability, whether it's traders, whether it's integration with greenfield wind, greenfield solar. Texas is, again, blessed with resources, and then also has the brownfield infrastructure on the back end for energy exports, where it's really carrot related in the US and in Canada, and you're exporting that energy driven by subsidies to stick mandates in Western Europe and other places as well. So again, it's all about being flexible, and really a lot of this is yet to be seen. So flexible through development and then flexible in operations.
Gotcha, reliability all the way. Excellent, well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I always appreciate when I can take a key fact, throughout the day, perhaps through lunch or the networking session afterwards. So if you could give us an important figure, statistic, phrase, quote that we can carry with us from this event. Margarita, why don't we start with you?
I don't have a quote, but I would encourage to think about 24/7 and what it really means, why we're doing that. I think that's a good question, like why are we doing this? What is the end goal? Is it like this intricate accounting exercise where you're matching your load to renewables across the globe, or is this a policy tool? So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you. Hugo?
So, we're at the University of Texas, so I'm going to focus my statistics in Texas, specifically ERCOT. ERCOT has added 45 gigawatts of capacity since Winter Storm Uri. That's in 4 years. No other market has been able to add that amount of capacity in the world that I know of. And so Texas is the place where we can get things done, both on the generation side and the large load side. And I invite you all to, spend the time and let's make Texas the place to be.
Excellent. Thank you. Chris?
Flexibility and adaptability. The grid was always moving towards a dynamic environment. Now we just really desperately need to get to that point. So I would emphasize those words, and those are usually the motto I go into with most of our regulatory engagements.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I guess I know there's a lot of students out there. I would say, again, in your careers as you come out, flexibility and adaptability. I started out in the refining world and was there for many years and got into energy transition. And now I really wanted to chase electricity. And obviously, as those worlds collide, not just from power needs to run these facilities to extending the value chain of electrons into e-fuels or whatever else it may be, electricity is just incredibly important. I think it's been a really exciting career to get into, where it might not have been super exciting in the past with some utility, a utility job right out of school or whatever it may be, but electrons are incredibly important and will become more important moving forward. So I encourage all students to explore all forms of energy. And again, you're not in a better spot than here at University of Texas and in the state of Texas for that.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we might have time for one question from the audience. So let's make sure it's a question, not a statement. Be brief and introduce yourself, please. So we see here in the front.
Okay, I'll make it brief. So Azucena Perez, Associate Director for Research Relations here at Cockrell, former computer scientist moving into the energy space. Here's my question. You have unlimited resources for the next 10 years to use only 2 sources of energy from carbon-free energy to really dig in and invest and explore. Only 2, which ones will you pick? For all panelists.
Nuclear?
Yeah. Nuclear is really necessary right now just because of the scale of energy that it offers on a CFE level. And that's really the thing, the magnitude of energy it can offer given the demand curve right now.
I would say nuclear and storage because storage, gives the fast response, right? And so you can drive base and changes within 15, 30 minutes with the nuclear base, but then you need storage to ride through the sub 15-minute intervals of changes in the system.
Also not a technology generation, but microgrid. That's another one.
Great. Well, please join me.
Thank you. If there are any investors in the room.
Please join me in thanking the panelists for such a great discussion.